All right, the recording has started.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the questions, I'll quickly give a disclaimer that whatever we discuss, it's your own personal views on
Hmm.
the personal experiences.
Yeah.
My very first question is related to the same article that you wrote about fit programmers that we were
Yeah.
discussing before the recording.
Yeah.
So, do you still find that your best agentic AI architectures come to you during a marathon PR rather than at your desk?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's usually for me, the marathon, I'm focused more on the running, but yeah, not literally, yes, it's going to be training runs or outdoor runs. I also have those, I'm no product plug, I don't represent them, but the Shocks headphones that are on sale sometimes at like Costco here in the US. They're, and I have them on sale. They're like, they work really well. Found them on trails and running around similar things. They work really well. So they're a good way for me to just kind of run and then think about other things. So it'll be podcasts sometimes, but usually it's just music.
Got it.
And it's kind of like back to the, yeah, your best ideas come to you when you're not focused on them. In my case, it's actually kind of related to, I didn't really come at it this from this end, but as I learned about mindfulness and all that, um, doing something else will helps a lot. So that's where the running has helped a lot. Not that I didn't start it for that reason, but yeah, it's ended up helping with the creativity, really. And people correlate this, like you become, they call it introverts extroverting while exercising. It's pretty bunch of running jokes, so to speak. Um, the more oxygen your brain gets, which is typically during exercise, the more creativity you have. That's funny because usually you're trying to draft things. So I end up now, I talk to Siri and I make notes while I'm running a lot of
Uh-huh.
times because otherwise the ideas aren't the same when I get back to my desk. So I prefer to draft them with Siri or ask ChatGPT questions while I'm running. So
It's awesome.
yeah.
All right, let's jump into some technical questions now. My first question would be on data in motion. Like you
Yeah.
spent years at Confluent
Hmm.
helping customers with Flink and Cora.
Yeah.
Uh, in an agentic AI system, why is data in motion superior to a traditional vector database? Does a streaming architecture help solve the stale data problem for agents?
So it does. It's kind of it's a good question. It's a multifaceted one. I would say the streaming data and the vector databases are complementary. So as you probably know what's going on with streaming data, as you're mentioning this, you're ending up good. You can do this with the Confluent because I used to help sell it too. Um, they have something called Tableflow, which closely correlates to Flink that goes to Iceberg and Delta tables, however you want to use it. It's a nice complementary suite, right? And not to plug it, you can do this with some of the other products on their own, but the Confluent approach was to integrate everything into a suite. And then the vector database is just another place where you might put streaming data. So if you think of it mentally, I think of it, not that it's the same thing, but I think of it like kind of like a Redis cache, where you want to hit it quickly and you want to look it up in an AI specific way in the case of vector databases or in websites, you may search with Redis, but you want the latest data from all your incoming systems in your sync, in your destination system that is then used. So DynamoDB is a cache or Redis, it doesn't really matter which product. Vector databases, yeah, they have a kind of different way of looking at things, right? So like vector calculus, like back to my Calc 3 days, when you've got vectors and you're doing distances between vectors, that's not the same thing as data that's coming in from some other system. So yeah, like I'm always impressed with ChatGPT, for instance, where it does well is correlating pieces of data that don't seem really related, but then you're like, oh, yeah, those are actually related because it's doing vector distances and the vector database lookups. To your point, it's also nice to not have to query the vector database all the time. So you might have multi-stage. So you might have streaming data coming in, vector database, and then queries that people ran recently is going to be in a cache somewhere. So you don't have to keep hitting and spending money on tokens all the time, if that helps.
Yeah,
Mhm.
got it. Uh, what about the, I mean, it's a different question on the
Yeah,
ambiguous problem. You
yeah,
mentioned you love tackling complex, ambiguous
yeah,
problems.
I do.
When a customer asks
Yeah.
for an AI agent, but their data governance is a mess, where do you even start? Like, do you fix the data quality first, or
Mhm.
do you build the agent and let it discover the quality issues?
It can work both ways. It's mostly you want to, my experience, you want to have a kind of a baseline data governance. It might not mean heavyweight data governance, but one way to do it is to take a format, like say there's no structure around it. There's no schema registry. There's no Unity catalog, whichever product you're using. There's just a bunch of JSON data or completely unstructured string data coming in. In that case, you can get the garbage in, garbage out. You want to have some kind of structure around it so that it, for instance, knows this happened in healthcare a lot over the years where you might have a text note from a doctor or a nurse, and then you're somehow trying to figure out if they've got a fall risk, right? So this happens. Clinically, there's not a lot of data to that string. You might be saying it's the fall season, and then the computer might say fall, but you're talking about a time of year. So, right, you want to have a structure around that. So if you can pull out structure, HL7 tries to do this. They did it over the years. They tried heavyweight, where they did like a reference information model, and that was useful in some areas where you could, like Europe, where and Australia, they could say this is how it's going to be. But in the US, where people were kind of free form in the way they do things, it didn't work
Mhm.
as well. The healthcare system didn't adopt it very much. So they had to switch back, and now there's HL7 Fire. So long story short, um, if you can, you think of it's like, I think of it a lot like software because I'm from that background. So if I have bottom-up estimations, they're great, but they're not really helpful to marketing. If I have top-down estimations, that's great for project managers, but doesn't help engineers much. If you can start somewhere in the middle, like this is kind of like the streaming data thing too, you want to start with what can we count on? Maybe it's not everything, but mostly we care about maybe we got the date and time correct as of the clinical event, for instance.
Mhm.
Maybe we got the lab values. We can extract those because they're numbers. We can get units out of those. And then we put those into a structure. And then we have all that other stuff that we throw into it, other text field. And then over time, as the model learns, you could re-extract data. So you can do that with the different products. We can throw out names like Flink. There are ways to put structure around that from unstructured data and create that output topic. And if we're talking Kafka language, um,
Mhm.
so kind of back to your data stream. And it's all one big. I like to think of it like there's a ball of yarn, right? And there's a way to there's some piece that you're going to pull. It's just like spaghetti code where you're like, this is a total mess, but it runs. So you want to start off with what's the thing I can count on the most? At least that's is what I find most useful. And then pull out a piece of it, and then pull out another piece of it, and then refactor that code. And pretty soon you've got all the go-to loops figured out, and you don't care about this other part because it won't kill anybody, but you do want to pull out this part of the CAT scanner image recognition that you do need. And then throw that into your vector database, and then throw that into your LLM. So it's a continuum because like maybe ChatGPT, not to fault them, but let's say their latest model doesn't really focus on healthcare. Let's say, for instance, not specific to them, nothing wrong with them. But let's say it's not specialized in that world. So you might train your own LLM on your own data, right?
Mhm.
Banking and finance, they have a lot of concerns with not sending that data up to the cloud and not knowing where it went, right? So they might train their own LLM around the finance data. So does that help?
Yeah. And like, is it because, as you mentioned, the fintech world, is it
Mhm.
because there is a lot of uh, risk factor involved and we do not have a risk mitigation process already in our workflow? Is the reason?
It can be a fair number of things, right? So if you're a hedge fund, there's a privacy concern. Maybe you're giving away your secret sauce. Maybe you're training other people you don't know. It could be you're training bad actors, and you could be
Mhm.
dealing with that in the market. Um, and yeah, it can mean regulatory requirements. It can mean you're not allowed to yet. It can mean there's a safety gating aspect to it. Like, and there's ways with Agentic you can say, well, it's safe to make trades for $3, but I don't want you making a $3 million trade without checking with a person, right? So you have to design it. It's kind of like old school way of looking at it would be business rules. They never really
Mhm.
worked because they didn't have the brains of Agentic, right? If you do purely business rules, then there's all these exceptions and you have these weird cases, and it's like a big while loop, for loop, switch, mostly like a switch loop, switch case situation in programming.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if I'm answering the question the way you. Is that answering it, or did you want to go more
It
into?
does answer it,
Yeah,
but I want to explore one more angle here. Like,
sure.
are we already in a stage where whenever we start working on these data sets, where in terms of financial services,
Hmm.
do we actually look at the risk factors right from the beginning in the initial stage?
How do you mean risk factors? Maybe I should just ask that.
I mean, where I mean, I was going through
Yeah. Like
the
risk of trading, regulatory risk. There's so many kinds of risk in fintech. I'm just trying to figure out how I
so
would answer.
basically, in
Yeah.
order to understand if the LLM model might fail in some ways, and if it does, how would we mitigate that risk? And what are the implications of it? What
Yeah.
kind of problems we might face if it fails? So do we
Yeah.
discuss that in the initial stages?
Yeah. I mean, so let's think of it like a different problem. And this might help. This is how it probably help me. So let's see if it helps you. We'll see. In banking, right? It's a very old industry on one level. A lot of
Yeah,
on-prem computers, still racks of equipment, co-location maybe, but usually their own facilities for safety, for regulatory, for all kinds of reasons. Um, in that world, the LLM might make a mistake, can be very, very costly, right? It could be $100 million mistake. So it's a lot like, let's say, satellites, right? You don't want to just launch satellites. You don't want a
right,
rocket to just go off when the LLM says it seems like a good weather. You want some extra checking to make sure LLM didn't reason wrong and say, oh yeah, because there are times where it'll think up things that are, oh, this is a great solution. I'm like, well, what about this unreleased? They haven't announced that product yet. What are you talking about? And it'll say, oh yeah,
right.
you're right. Never mind, and it'll switch. So in that case, yeah, there's definitely, if the LLM made a mistake, so there's two ways to look at this that I'm seeing. One is prevent all mistakes. And that's a closed world. Like you can't use an LLM unless somebody approves everything. Heavyweight
Right.
process. The other way would be simulation. Like let's call paper trading a simulation. You can do this, like Schwab has a paper trading approach, right? You can go play
Mhm.
with Thinkorswim or whatever the equivalent is now that they've all merged Ameritrade with Schwab and all this. You can paper trade all kinds. You can do fake options. You can do all this stuff. But to make it real, you need to put money behind it, right? So I would say LLMs are safe to play with it, but they're backwards looking. They're looking at previous data and they're trying to
Yeah,
predict the market, which is inherently risky. They have forward-looking statements in all the annual reports that say, look, this is previous. We can't guarantee the future. Um, so if you're trying to ask me about LLM adoption in fintech, maybe that's more what we're talking.
yeah,
I would say it's definitely getting there. It's fintech's all about risk reward, right? Cost. So the value of a trade done by an LLM has to outweigh the cost. And for that to be true, you'd have to say that they're better at arbitrage than a person, for instance, trading
right.
Brazilian currency against US. That's going to be hard to prove unless you're able, just like a clinical study, you want to be able to, you have to execute the same trade with a person and the same trade with with a machine. And then the problem is you also have noisy neighbors. So if you do a big enough trade, one might cancel the other one out. You know, a
Right.
few $1 billion on both. Somebody's got the money. Elon Musk decides to try this, let's say. Um, it still could very well cancel out because the market timing, even 5 seconds different. So it's hard to run a parallel test. It's like a lot of performance testing. It's hard to run a precisely exactly the same test. And to do the same thing with rockets, you launch two rockets. One's a Falcon 9, one's a Falcon Heavy. I mean, they're expensive to launch. So
Yeah.
that would be the main thing I would say is a blocker in fintech. If it's a blocker, I don't have a close read on that right now at this moment, but in fintech, I would say just like healthcare, you can't really do patient. This is always the problem with healthcare, double blind testing and testing like you don't have two people that are identical. So if you do treatments that are the same on two different people, you're not totally sure if the treatment is really better
Hmm.
done a certain way, LLM treated versus, LLM did recommended a surgery versus a doctor did. you don't have an idea of that human system factor. You have to be able to take that out of the equation, right?
Right.
So yeah, in fintech, um, I would say if you're seeing, for instance, if somebody says, "Oh, I'm not seeing adoption of LLMs in fintech," I would say, "Okay, well, that's probably the case because LLMs are what, 3 years old? People have been investing in value. They've been doing value investing since at least
For the
70
age.
years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So 3 years for finance isn't that long. Um, 3 years, 4 years, and as the parameters get bigger. So finance, I would say, is one. It's not the least likely to adopt tech. They adopt certain tech very fast. Like if they can make risk reward on payment processing, that's definitely there. They adopt it quick. Capital One did that, right? They do great fraud detection. But in terms of LLMs, I don't think the business case is there yet for it. It's definitely getting there. I mean, if the brainstorming part is there, it's research, it saves a lot of time. You could probably help
Right.
an analyst. It won't replace, just like programmers. It doesn't replace a good programmer. It helps a programmer think about other pieces that aren't necessarily in that programmer's head. Kind of back to our mindfulness thing. It's like,
Correct.
what other unknown unknowns are you not considering? And it's hard to structure that. So anyway, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. My next question is on the clinical data pipelines. Like
Yeah,
you have delivered pipelines for clinical use cases
great.
in healthcare.
Yeah.
The cost of an AI hallucination isn't just a bad user experience. Same thing. I mean, I think this is what I meant by risk mitigation here.
Mhm.
Like, since the hallucination isn't just a bad user experience in this healthcare industry,
Right.
it's the safety risk. So, does data governance in AI look different for healthcare than it does for general enterprise software?
Yeah, it definitely does. Healthcare always has this struggle between everything being structured data and
Mhm.
restricting clinical care too much, right? Because it started off more as, in its guts of healthcare are do no harm, right? So for that to happen, it's very hard to structure the data fully because if you're talking clinical notes, doctors and nurses and other practitioners need to be able to do anything they need to for the patient.
Yeah.
And that's very hard on systems, right? So I would say yes, data governance is very important. If you use an approach like a schema registry, the nice part about it is you put just enough structure around it. So unlike the old ways where you had to do entity relationship diagrams to get anything structured, you had to really force things into fields or put them in a text field and hope it worked out later in terms of processing. And this is where data lakes, not to fault them, but this is the original problem with data lakes is that I've seen people in healthcare do this and they're taking all their old systems and they dump all the data into data lake and the running joke is like, and this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing where it's like, what do we do with it? It's kind of a data mess, right? Data mode, data, it's hard to go back later and structure that data. When you've got a system, this happens in astronomy, which I'm into also, right? So they have tons of astronomy data generated every year. The problem they had for historically, not maybe now as much, but the physical media would get obsolete every year. So this is the problem with data governance you can run into is if your formats don't evolve, which is why schema evolution is really nice. If you're using a schema registry, you can say, just like backwards compatibility in a COM interface, like in Microsoft COM or in other types of programming interfaces, you can add fields on and not throw out the old ones. You may not use them. So in
Mhm.
healthcare, let's say the analogy would be, but well, forget what, we don't have to go there yet. The data governance is very important for healthcare would be a summary statement. The question would be, the caveat would be you want to do just enough data governance. So it's kind of back to finance. There's still a risk part of it. There's still this is a value part. Like when I did a lot of sales work, a lot of this was about proving out things. So proof of concept, right? The old
Okay.
prototype sort of, but proof of concept. So you want to pick a thing that you can do in a sprint, like 2 weeks to 4 weeks, 1 or 2 sprints that will show the value of the solution. It doesn't matter what vendor, it's just that you want to be able to show that value. So yeah, data governance is very important for healthcare. It's going to be, in some cases, it's hard to decide what you want to govern, but yes, you definitely, maybe a too long an answer. You want to edit this a bit, but yeah, I would say it's very important. It's much easier to structure on things like the lab values than it is on clinical notes, right? Does that
Got
help?
it.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
kind
it
of a
does. It does.
discussion thing, but yeah.
Couple of ones. The last question on the hybrid cloud is that you have designed hybrid cloud architectures as enterprises try to keep their data private. Are you seeing a shift toward local agents running on premise, or is the cloud still the only way to get the performance needed for large vision models?
Well, okay, so depending on what kind of agents you're running, you can run them locally. Like I've seen OpenClaw becoming a big thing, right? People run it on
Yeah.
their Mac Minis. Um, yeah, I don't, it's more about scale. So it's like when Apple brings Apple Intelligence onto chip, right? It's
Mhm.
great for certain things. Summarizing my text messages, it can handle on my phone or on my computer, right? Totally. And that's helpful most of the time. I'll still read my friend's text, but in terms of like, I got a tracking update, fine, I'll read the summary, right? So if you're looking at cloud, it's still back to risk reward in what I've seen. So if you can do it on-prem, you generally let's think of it a different way. A lot of data you don't want in the cloud. It's too expensive to send it to the cloud.
Correct.
So in a factory floor environment, a hybrid cloud might be my robots are getting all my data and I only care about my torque wrench reading for 30 seconds, right? So the data is too much off of a bunch of instruments, which are, or machines, or however you want to look at it.
Mhm.
Um, the data flowing through a real-time system on like, say, a factory floor that builds cars is way too much data to ship up to a cloud. You can't even afford it to have that kind of link. It may not even be physically possible to buy a link that will send it up to the cloud. And then you've paid all the ingress cost or egress cost or both to
Yeah.
get it there. So, and then you got a bunch of data you don't care to process. So that would be more like, let's say it's in the streaming data world, it'd be on-prem, would process with Flink on-prem. It would send only certain data up to the dashboard system or the overall reporting system in the cloud. And then the people in corporate want to look at how did we do today? How many cars did we build? Then they're
Mhm.
okay. And then you could add LLMs on top of that in the cloud just to have it somewhere, not have to host it. Maybe you can host it locally if you want. It's just a question. Like I've heard things like, okay, to run a chat GPT anywhere near what you want in the cloud is going to cost you 100 grand of rack of equipment. So I don't personally buy an M5 Pro laptop yet because it's not that great for me. I don't want to spend $3,000 to $5,000 on something that's a little bit better to run Llama when I could spend $20 a month, maybe 200 a month if I really need Claude and ChatGPT really a lot. For a
Yeah.
couple of months, I really needed a lot, then I just cut it back down to 20 bucks a month. So that's the build versus buy is more of what I would say. So people are deciding how much does it matter. Also, they're letting Amazon and Oracle and others that run data centers for them worry about the power bill, right? Just running that hardware
Correct.
is costly, right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
My last set of questions are around the knowledge gap. My first question on this is that
Yeah.
you're known for an ownership mindset.
Mhm.
What is the one thing technical architects forget to own
Mhm.
when they move from traditional software to agentic AI?
Forget to own. It's a really good question. Um, I actually think we covered some of it, so let's highlight that. It would be data quality is not something an architect usually thinks about. And I would say that's probably the biggest area that people forget. It's not because they're bad at architecture, it's that you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing in data science kind of work into an architect's role. And that's a hard thing to do because you're basically asking them to be kind of like a statistician and a programmer. It's like, okay, so they're not trained on that necessarily unless they happen to come from data science. There are people who do lots of that and they came from the Spark and the R worlds and they did a lot of other work like this. Um, but in general, yeah, that would be data quality, which relates to data governance. That's the area people often forget. Um, you probably saw my LinkedIn, some of the work I've done. It has a lot to do with the struggles come down to tagging the data, making sure it's actually adopted, making sure people actually have formats for the data that they can use long term.
Right.
The powerful part about it now is that people are not completely unaware of it. It's that they just need advice on how to use it best, right? Best practices. Look forward
Thank
to
you
it.
so much, Cameron. Thank you for your time, and it's lovely talking to you. And I'll make sure that I stay in touch on LinkedIn.
Sounds great. Thanks, Akash. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye for
Yep.
now.
Bye. Bye for now.